Chapter 1. They dressed me in white as though purity had ever protected anyone. Mara's fingers were gentle as she fastened the moonstone clasps along the sleeves of my ceremonial gown. But there was pity in her touch. There always was. Pity had followed me through every year of my life in the Moonshadow Pack. Soft in some hands, sharp in others, but always there. "Hold still, child," she murmured, stepping back to study me. "You'll pull the stitching." I lowered my hands from where they had twisted nervously at my waist. In the polished silver mirror across the room, I barely recognized myself. The gown fell in pale folds to my ankles, simple and elegant, with silver embroidery at the collar and cuffs. My dark hair had been brushed until it shone, and pinned half up with white blossoms gathered from the eastern garden. The flowers were sacred to the moon goddess. Brides wore them. So did future lunars. For one dangerous moment, hope rose in my chest and made it hard to breathe. Tonight Alpha Kael would stand before the gathered pack under the full moon. Tonight he would choose his mate, or he would destroy me. The room smelled of lavender oil, candle wax, and the faint smoke drifting in from the great ceremonial fires already being lit in the clearing below. Outside my chamber window, the packlands glowed silver under moonrise. I could hear distant voices, laughter, footsteps, the low beat of ceremonial drums. Everyone was gathering. Everyone was waiting to see whether the Wolfless Omega would be claimed. I looked away from my reflection first. At 22, I had learned not to stare too long at what I lacked. In our world, a female who did not awaken a wolf was not merely unfortunate. She was lesser, incomplete, a quiet humiliation wrapped in skin and bone and breathing shame. I had heard every word for it over the years. Broken, burden, moon forgotten, and most often of all, Omega. Not because I had been born low, but because the pack had long ago decided there was no other place for a girl without a wolf. "Stop thinking so hard," Mara said, softening her voice as she crossed behind me. She had known me since childhood, and had always been kinder than most. "Tonight is blessed." I almost smiled at that. Blessed. Perhaps once, when I was younger, I might have believed it, before I understood how often fate arrived wearing the face of humiliation, before I learned how quickly a sacred bond could become a source of mockery when it tied a powerful alpha to a girl the pack barely tolerated. Still, beneath the old bruises in my heart, something living and foolish refused to die. Because Kael was my mate, not in rumor, not in childish fantasy, in truth. I had felt the bond years ago, faint at first, like a silver thread brushing the inside of my chest. With time it had grown stronger, steadier, impossible to deny. Even now, if I stood very still, I could sense it, a distant pull beneath the panic, cool and taut, and painfully real. Kael had felt it too. I knew he had. There had been moments over the years when his gaze lingered too long, when his jaw tightened if another unmated male stood too close to me, when the air between us vibrated with something neither of us dared name aloud. But a bond was not the same thing as love. And in Moonshadow, it was not always stronger than pride. Mara adjusted the white blossoms in my hair one last time, then rested her hands on my shoulders. "There," she said. "Done." I rose from the carved stool and smoothed my palms over the front of my gown, as if that could quiet the trembling in them. The silk was cool beneath my fingers. Delicate. Too delicate for me, perhaps. I had never been delicate, no matter what the pack believed. Silence was not fragility. Endurance was not weakness. But people often mistook what did not announce itself for something small. The door opened behind me before I could answer my own thoughts. "You look beautiful." Elara, my Seraphine's voice floated into the room warm as honey, polished as glass. I turned slowly. My sister stood in the doorway in a gown the color of pale gold, her hand still resting on the carved wood as if she had not already taken possession of every room she entered. Her dark hair had been twisted into an elegant crown at the back of her head, and moonlight caught along the line of her throat where a thin silver chain shimmered against her skin. She was stunning. Everyone said so. They always had. Seraphine had the kind of beauty that made people straighten when she passed. The kind that fit neatly into expectation. Strong, poised, radiant, wolf-blooded. Every inch, the daughter a pack could boast of. She smiled at me, and I felt 12 years old again. "Thank you," I said. Her gaze slid over me, taking in the gown, the flowers, the silver embroidery. "White suits you," she said lightly. "It makes you look almost untouched by all the gossip." Mara stiffened near the hearth. I kept my face calm. "I wasn't aware you came to compliment me." Mara Seraphine's smile widened by a fraction. "Can I not compliment my own sister on an important night?" She moved into the room with graceful ease, and the contrast between us struck me the way it always did. Where I had learned to make myself smaller, Seraphine had been raised to shine. She never hesitated before a room, never questioned whether she belonged. She simply entered and expected the world to arrange itself around her. The world usually did. Mara bowed her head. "I should see to the lower hall," She slipped out quickly, leaving the door half open. Seraphine crossed to the mirror and adjusted one of the white blossoms in my hair with 2 careful fingers. "You really do look lovely," she said. "I'm almost surprised." I met her eyes in the mirror. "Almost?" She gave a soft laugh. "Don't pout. It ruins the effect." "I'm not pouting, no," she said, still smiling. "You're hoping." The word landed between us like a stone. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Outside, the drums sounded again, deeper now, joined by the rising murmur of voices gathering in the clearing. Seraphine lowered her hand and looked at my reflection as though studying something she had never quite understood. "I wonder," she said softly, "if this is what hurts you most. Not that they whisper, not even that you never got a wolf, but that after all these years, some part of you still believes you might be chosen." I turned then, unable to keep looking at her through glass. "Why are you here?" She lifted one shoulder. "Because I'm your sister. Iristas has never stopped you from enjoying my suffering." Her smile thinned, though it did not disappear. Such a cruel thing to say on a sacred night. "You came here for a reason. Say it." For the first time, some of the sweetness dropped from her face. What remained was colder, sharper, more honest. "If Kael hesitates tonight," she said, "do not embarrass yourself by begging." The words struck clean and deep. I stared at her. She stepped closer, lowering her voice even though no one else was in the room. "The pack has already endured years of awkwardness over this bond. You know what they say. You know what they think. If he chooses duty over fate, then at least have the dignity to accept it quietly." The old pain rose hot enough to blur the edge of my vision, but I had spent a lifetime learning how to survive without giving others the satisfaction of seeing me break. So I drew one slow breath and said, "You speak as though you already know what he'll do." Seraphine tilted her head. "Don't you?" That was the cruelest part of her. She never snarled, never shouted. She only pressed exactly where she knew the wound already lived. The distant bond in my chest pulsed once, taut and uncertain, and I hated that she might have seen the flicker of fear in my face. Then, just as suddenly, she smiled again and smoothed an imaginary crease from my sleeve. "Come," she said, all graceful affection once more. "They're waiting." She took my arm before I could refuse, and together we stepped into the corridor. The pack house had been transformed for the ceremony. Silver banners bearing the crescent crest of Moonshadow hung between the carved pillars, stirring gently in the night breeze drifting through the open archways. Bowls of sacred flame lined the stone hall, their smoke perfumed with juniper and cedar. Wolves in ceremonial dress moved in clusters toward the great clearing, their voices low, excited, curious. And curious they were. As Seraphine and I descended the main stairs, Conversations faltered around us. Heads turned. A few bowed to my sister. Others looked at me too quickly, and then away again, as if shame might spread by eye contact. One older male near the entrance didn't look away at all. His mouth tightened with open skepticism before he muttered something under his breath to the woman beside him. I did not hear the words clearly, but I didn't need to. Wolfless. The word followed me even when unspoken. My body knew the rhythm of it too well. The slight tightening in my throat, the careful lift of my chin, the way my shoulders straightened not from pride but from practiced defense. I had learned years ago that humiliation fed on visible weakness. If I could not escape it, I could at least deny it an audience. Beside me, Seraphine moved like moonlight over water, serene and admired. A young warrior bowed his head to her as we passed. One of the elder females smiled warmly and touched her arm. No one touched mine. The clearing opened before us in a blaze of silver fire. Moonlight spilled over the sacred stones in the center of the ceremonial grounds, where generations of mates had been joined before the pack. Great torches ringed the space, and beyond them rows of pack members gathered in dark cloaks and formal dress, their faces lit gold and white by flame and moon. At the far end stood the elder council, robed in ceremonial grey. Above them all, the full moon hung bright and merciless. I stopped at the edge of the clearing and tried to steady my breathing. This was real now. This was the night I had imagined in secret so many times that the thought of it felt older than reason. Not the grandeur of it, not the audience. Just one thing. Kael stepping forward, looking at me, and choosing me despite everything the pack thought I lacked. I had never asked the moon goddess for greatness, only belonging. "Stand straight," Seraphine murmured at my side, still smiling for the watching crowd. "All eyes are on us powers," as if we had ever shared the same fate. We moved into position near the front, where unmated daughters of the pack's bloodlines traditionally stood during claiming rites. I could feel the stare of nearly every person present pressing against my skin. A group of young she-wolves stood a few paces behind us. One of them whispered, "Do you think he'll really do it?" Another gave a short, dry laugh. Would you heat crawled up my neck, but I kept my gaze forward. The drums began again, 3 deep strikes that rolled through the clearing and into my bones. Silence followed so suddenly it felt unnatural. Even the night insects seemed to still. Then he arrived. Kael entered from the western path with the measured confidence of a male who had never doubted the ground would hold beneath him. He wore black ceremonial leathers, marked with silver stitching at the shoulders and cuffs. The Alpha crest worked across his chest in moon thread, so fine it caught the light every time he moved. His dark hair was swept back from his face, and his expression was composed, unreadable, carved from the kind of certainty lesser people often mistake for strength. The crowd bowed its head as he passed. I did not. I couldn't. I stood frozen as he came into the heart of the clearing, every breath in my body turning shallow and sharp. Even after all these years, there was no preparing for the effect he had on me. It was not just that he was handsome, though he was. It was not even that he carried power easily, though he did. It was the bond. That silver thread inside me drew taut the moment he stepped beneath the moon, alive now, vibrating with force. So he felt it too. I knew he did. His shoulders tightened almost imperceptibly, and for one dangerous heartbeat, his gaze found mine across the clearing. I forgot every whisper, every slight, every warning Seraphine had just breathed into my ear, because in that single moment, there was something in his eyes I had not expected to see. Conflict. My pulse stumbled. The elder at the center stone lifted his staff. "Tonight," he called, voice carrying clear through the clearing. "Under the witness of the moon goddess, and before the gathered pack, Alpha Kael Thorn will declare the female he chooses to stand beside him from." The night seemed to contract around those words. My hands trembled once at my sides before I folded them together. Please, I thought, though I was no longer sure whether I was speaking to Kael, to the goddess, or to the final foolish hope still beating in my chest. Please. Beside me, Seraphine stood radiant and still. Kael stepped forward into the center of the ring of moonlight. The silver crest at his chest flashed once. The bond inside me pulled so hard it hurt. Then he lifted his chin, turned toward the pack, and began to speak.